Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Society of New Haven. I am Rich Stockton, a member of the Worship Committee and your worship associate today. You know, it's so nice to be back together again after so long. And finally be able to share worship in person with our new minister, Reverend Linda Susan. If you're joining us for the first time, and surely the first time in a long time, we're so glad you chose to spend this time with us. We still have to avoid close contact, and we can't guarantee whether we'll be able to meet in person next week. But for now, let me offer you all a big virtual hug. You can contact us by email at membership@usnh.org, or you can go to our website, usnh.org, to find out more about us. There are more details and other announcements in our newsletter. And I'm happy to announce again, after a year and a half, to please silence your cell phones and electronic devices. This is a covenantal congregation that believes Black lives matter, that every person has the right to affirm their own gender identity, and that all people are inherently worthy. All of us are imperfect, but we're here to drop our defenses and trust that what happens in worship is powerful and life-giving. Together, we affirm that this day and our being together can make each of us braver, more compassionate, and wiser than when we woke up this morning.
Hi. That seemed important to start with. The call to worship today is called Space for New Possibility by Reverend Gretchen Haley. What's going to happen? Will everything be okay? What can I do? In these days, we find ourselves too often stuck with these questions on repeat. What's going to happen? Will everything be okay? What can I do? We grasp at signs and markers, articles of news and analysis, Facebook memes and forwarded emails, as if the new zodiac, capable of forecasting all that life may yet bring our way, as if we could prepare, as if life had ever made any promises of making sense or turning out the way we'd thought, as if we are not also actors in this still unfolding story. For this hour we gather to surrender to the mystery, to release ourselves from the needing to know, the yearning to have it all already figured out, and also the burden of believing we either have all the control or none. Here in our song and our silence, our stories and our sharing, we make space for a new breath, a new healing, a new possibility to take root. That is courage forged in the fire of our coming together and felt in the spirit that comes alive in this act of faith, that we believe still a new world is possible, that we are creating it already, here and now. Come, let us worship together.
The words for the chalice lighting today are based on words by Janet Parsons. The flame of our chalice this morning is a symbol of the warmth and brightness of our connections. The flame lights our way back together again from our separate COVID lives, and it lights our way forward into this new time of promise and renewal. Covenant lies at the center of how Unitarian Universalists gather in community. We are united not by a particular set of beliefs, but by the promises we make about how we will be together, how we will treat each other, and how we will seek to mend relationships when we fall short of our aspirations. While the following words express our intentions in writing, our true covenant lives and breathes in our actions. Please join me now in reciting these words. They appear either in your order of service or on your screen. We covenant together to create and nurture a culture of respect and kindness, and to engage in the spiritual and everyday practice of loving more generously. To this end, we will strive to be open, value differences, listen deeply, use kind language, speak our truths, work with conflict, and seek humor and joy.
Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to see you all here on this beautiful day. As Erica and I sing the hymns together, we invite you to listen and to meditate on the words as you wish. But for now, to help ensure the safety of our community, we ask that you refrain from singing along. We give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and far away.
We give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. For all gathered here and those far away, for this place we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. For all gathered here and those far away, for this joy we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day.
This morning, Jesse Greist, our Director of Lifespan Religious Education, is doing children's chapel outside. You may have seen them coming in, and so I get to do the message for all. The story is called The Farmer on the Hill. On the top of the hill lived the village curmudgeon. No one knew why the farmer was so ornery, yet he never seemed to have a kind word to say. No one knew why he was so inhospitable, yet he would not even open his door to visitors. No one knew why he lived isolated at the top of a hill that was difficult to traverse, yet it was rumored that he had moved there after the death of his young son. What everyone did know was that he wanted to be left alone, and alone he was. It was time for the festival. Everyone in the village would be there, except for the farmer at the top of the hill. The women sang, the men told tales, and the children played, screaming at the top of their lungs as they ripped and ran, trailing long streamers behind them. It was all the noise that brought the farmer at the top of the hill outside. "What is all the commotion?" he wondered aloud. Looking down, he could see the village festivities. But it was not the bright sights of the celebration that took his breath away. For looking beyond the village, out to the nearby sea, the farmer saw a huge wave rolling towards the shore with tremendous speed. Though he had never witnessed one, he knew what this was: tsunami. Though his house was safe up upon the hill, the tsunami was heading straight for the village. The farmer yelled out a warning, but because of the festivities, no one could hear him. He jumped up and down and waved his arms, but because everyone was having so much fun together, no one saw him. The farmer was frantic. How could he stop the tsunami from drowning the entire village? Suddenly, he knew. Though he might be ornery and inhospitable, he knew the village people were not. They had always reached out to him with kindness. The farmer did the only thing he could think to do. With no concern for his own safety, he rushed into his fields and lit all his crops afire. A raging inferno ensued as the dry vegetation quickly wilted and crumbled in the flames. Who saw the flames first? No one knew. Perhaps a bright-eyed child or an elder with a nose finely attuned to smoke. Whoever it was, the cry of "Fire!" spread quickly, and all the festivities stopped as the villagers' eyes turned toward the hill. "Quick! Get buckets! We have to save the farmer and his land!" And everyone did. All the villagers rushed up the hill with buckets, with blankets, and with no concern for their own safety. They reached the top and doused the last of the flames. By then, All the farmers' crops were destroyed. Yet no one from the village drowned from the tsunami. And they all knew why.
I now invite you to join me in holding in our hearts the joy and sorrow of those in our community, closing your eyes and going inward if you're comfortable doing so. Today, some woke with a sorrow so great they ask for the help of this community to share it. Others woke with a joy so great it must be shared. Ron Grunlow is still in the hospital. Please keep Ron and his family in your hearts during this difficult time. And for the joys and sorrows that haven't been spoken and which remain in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts, we bear witness. Together, let us give thanks for this community of care.
I invite you into a spirit of meditation, prayer, or contemplation of ultimate things. How good it is to be together, whether here in person or from home on the live stream. We are one community, bound by care and love and friendship and sorrow. I invite you to get comfortable in your body, whatever that might look like for you, perhaps with your feet on the floor, perhaps with your eyes closed or softened. Just listen to the space. Listen to the silence that is created by this particular set of people on this particular day. Without haste, return to this space, to your body, to the particularities of this moment. You are surrounded by those who wish you well, and it is good to be together. Blessed be.
We are grateful for all the good things we have been given. We appreciate the uplifting energy of community. The spirit of generosity fills us, and we want to give back also. There are so many things we can do together that we can't do alone. We're not going to pass around the collection plates today, but we still need your offering more than ever to support the ministries of this congregation. When you get back home, you can go to our website, usnh.org, online services donation plate, or mail to our address 700 Hartford Turnpike in Hamden, Connecticut 06517. And also there will be plates near the exits where you can place a contribution. Be as generous as you are able. Your contributions are gratefully received. Thank you, Gretchen and Bill. Today's reading is To Be Hopeful in Bad Times from Howard Zinn. To be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It is based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, kindness. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history will determine our lives. If we see only the worst, it destroys our capacity to do something. If we remember those times and places, and there are so many, where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act, and at least the possibility of sending this spinning top of a world in a different direction. And if we do act, in however small a way, we don't have to wait for some grand utopian future. The future is an infinite succession of presents, and to live now as we think human beings should live, in defiance of all that is bad around us, is itself a marvelous victory.
I don't know about you, but this live music is just a balm to my soul. So today's reading came from Howard Zinn, who was a historian, author, professor, and activist. His most well-known book is A People's History of the United States, which looks at U.S. history through the lens and words of everyday people, people whose voices have so often been left out of history books. And it chronicles the grassroots struggles for a fair wage, an 8-hour workday, child labor laws, health and safety standards, universal suffrage, women's rights, and racial equality. Now, I know these topics were missing from my U.S. history classes, even though I attended a highly regarded public school. I remember pretty much jumping from war to war. I mean, we went from the end of the Civil War in 1865 to a brief mention of carpetbaggers, and then sped ahead to 1914 and World War I. So is it any wonder that I missed out on great thinkers like W.B. Du Bois and Frances Ellen Watkin Harper until decades later? I used to think that history was incredibly boring. In my experience, it amounted mostly to a bunch of names and dates, and again, almost always about war. In my 20s, though, I had a dear friend who studied history, and given how passionate he was about the subject, I started to wonder what he'd found there that I'd missed. Fast forward to seminary. A course in Unitarian Universalist history is a requirement for becoming a UU minister, so I decided to take it in my first semester to get it out of the way. This turned out to be a brilliant idea, but for a reason I never would have foreseen. My professor, Reverend Dr. Susan Ritchie, made sure that every assignment included something about how the history was still relevant today. Suddenly, those names and dates weren't the end game, but the canvas against which the present also played out. The stories from the past provided context for how the future might unfold. As UU history came alive, it illuminated and enriched everything else I learned in seminary because I could make connections that I wouldn't have otherwise understood. Suddenly, I shared my friends' enthusiasm for history. Now, I can only imagine what topics I might have learned about growing up if my classes had focused more on relevance than on mere facts. Maybe I would have heard about the way that labor unions fought for the 8-hour workday, instead of assuming it had always existed. Maybe I would have recognized myself in the suffragettes who put their bodies on the line for the right to vote. Maybe I would have better understood the racialized terror that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. helped end through community organizing. As we heard in the reading, to be hopeful in bad times is not just foolishly romantic. It is based on the fact that human history is a history not only of cruelty, but also of compassion, sacrifice, courage, kindness. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history will determine our lives. So why do we hear so often about the cruelty, but not the compassion? Often the answer is rooted in sexism or racism or ableism or other systemic bias. For example, we get stories of witches being burned, but not witches healing people with herbal remedies and helping deliver babies. I learned about slavery in the US, but nothing about the Haitian Revolution, which has been described as the largest and most successful slave rebellion in the Western Hemisphere. It's important to note that we've got some hardwired biology at work too. We keep vigilant for the thing that might go wrong so that we can try and prepare a response that will keep us alive. If it bleeds, it leads didn't begin with modern media. The amygdala was way ahead on that one. Ironically, though, that biological imperative to look for the worst robs us of the energy we need to make things better. I remind myself often that much has changed over time, however incomplete, uneven, or under attack those victories might be. My go-to example when hope feels elusive is the way that queer rights have changed in the last 50 years. Again, we still have a very long way to go to ensure everyone is treated equitably. But my very presence in this pulpit as an out, bisexual, non-binary, ordained and settled minister in Unitarian Universalism demonstrates real progress. I remember a time when few people knew what transgender even meant, much less fought for trans rights. Heck, LGBT history is now a mandated part of the curriculum in public schools in California, New Jersey, Colorado, and Illinois. They'll be hearing history that I never did, and that I guess many of you never did either. Victories don't have to be on a grand scale like the Haitian Revolution or the Civil Rights Movement to matter and to add up. In today's story about the farmer on the hill, the villagers were simply doing what they do by being kind to the farmer without expectation of anything in return. But all of that kindness, offered freely despite the farmer's orneriness, added up. Thus, when he saw that tsunami coming, he knew he had to find a way to save them. In doing so, he demonstrated the compassion, sacrifice, courage, and kindness that Howard Zinn described. I found myself wondering what might have happened next in the story. I wouldn't be surprised if the other families gave the farmer some of their own food, since he had sacrificed his crops to save them. And even though they might have been facing hard times due to the tsunami, they wouldn't let him starve. And I think his curmudgeonly self might have thawed just enough to accept their help. Thus, an accumulation of small kindnesses inspired a major act of selflessness, which in turn, at least in my mind, begot more generosity. That's how an infinite succession of presence creates the future. But we must choose wisely in that infinite succession of presence. What we choose to emphasize in this complex history, wrote Zinn, will determine our lives. If we see only the worst, it destroys our capacity to do something. If we remember those times and places, and there are so many, where people have behaved magnificently, this gives us the energy to act, and at least the possibility of sending this spinning top of a world in a different direction. We see this in microcosm here at USNH. People have told me about times when they felt something meaningful to them was belittled by a fellow congregant, or when there was triangulation in how someone communicated. These wounds are real and sap energy and joy from those who want to make USNH their spiritual home. At the same time, I've witnessed acts of incredible generosity. I've noticed the ways people quietly care for each other with a phone call or a soup delivery or a ride to a doctor's appointment. I've seen how that care extends to the greater community, whether through school supply donations or lobbying for legislation or writing tens of thousands of get out the vote postcards. Maybe it's the effects of the pandemic, but I've witnessed far more people behaving magnificently during my time here than those causing harm. The equally magnificent thing is that we can make that choice every single time. Indeed, we Unitarian Universalists even have a mechanism for describing the behavior to which we aspire. It's called covenant. Thank you for that. That was perfect. It's called covenant, and we make it our practice to live into it. That's how we live now as we think human beings should live. In doing so, we create models for living that others may follow. We offer new stories to tell. And as another seminary professor of mine pointed out, religions are especially good at telling and retelling stories over time. We give people hope and engender the energy to act. Hope is a funny thing. Humans so often conflate hopefulness with foolishness. I suspect a lot of it is fear of disappointment. If I'm cynical and everything falls apart, I can say, "I told you so," instead of what's really going on, which is, I'm heartbroken. But when we dismiss hope as naivete, we create a self-fulfilling prophecy of disappointment or failure. I'd rather take Elvis Costello's question seriously. What's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? To be clear, I'm not suggesting, and I don't think Howard Zinn is either, that we have to be sunny and positive all the time. I mean, depression is real. Grief is real. Just having a plain old hard day is real. What I'm talking about is an overall orientation towards the possibilities built into our humanity, not just the threats that our fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response notices. As Rebecca Solnit reminds us, there's always room for hope because the story is not yet complete. And in that incompleteness, we have the power to act. Our defiance of all that is bad around us is itself a marvelous victory because it returns life to our living. It shows us ways of being far beyond what we might have been taught, with perhaps more compassion or courage or kindness or willingness to sacrifice than we would have imagined on our own. When that door of possibility opens in front of us, we might make our corner of the world more just and more joyous as we cross the threshold. And we just might become the people who behave magnificently. Amen, and blessed be.
For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift, which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life. For sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain, and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks. For all that is our life, for all that is our life, we sing with thanks and praise, for all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad.
Please read along the words for extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Friends, hope is one of the most powerful tools that we have for changing this world. Not just the thin hope of, oh, I hope that happens, but the deep hope of knowing that life will flourish whenever and wherever it can. And our job is to do that as much as possible and make those conditions real. So let us go now with courage and with kindness and be a blessing to the world. Amen.